Our speaker today is Matt Younkle. He is a graduate of UW-Madison and is a successful serial entrepreneur. Not the cereal you eat. He's most famous for inventing the Turbo Tap, a device that pours draft beer faster and with less waste that's used in pubs and stadiums worldwide. He said he gets his best inspiration when he's waiting for beer, right? Prior to TurboTap, he developed technology to grow the first food in space, and he helped pioneer streaming audio and video on the web. Matt is currently charting the path for the future of music collecting as the co-founder of Murphy, the best place to collect, buy, sell, and trade music online. Matt is the co-founder of the Forward Festival, which was launched in 2010. The festival has 5 events with several hundred attendees its first year. This year's event runs from August 18th to the 25th, and now has 40 events with thousands of attendees. Matt is going to tell us about the growth of the Forward Festival and how it stayed true to its roots. By entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurs. We look forward to your presentation, Matt, and we have made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund to say thanks for joining us at Rotary. As we welcome him to the podium, I want to remind everyone that afterwards there will be time for questions and there will be microphones in the audience for that. So please welcome Matt.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So before the invite went out for the Rotary meeting today, how many people had heard about the Forward Festival? Pretty good number, maybe a little more than half, okay. This year, the Forward Festival is Madison's premier event for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. We've got 44 events taking place this year. Runs August 18th through the 25th. We're estimating that we'll have about 3,000 people attending those events over that week. So, and if you haven't heard about it or you don't know much about it, you're not alone. The festival has been growing pretty much 100% organically since we launched it. So basically through word of mouth and its modern day equivalents like email and social media and whatnot. We really don't advertise. We're in the media just a little bit. We had a segment that ran on For the Record with Neil Heinen over the weekend, so maybe you've heard about it that way. But its genesis goes back to 2010. The prior year, my wife and I had just moved back to Madison from a sabbatical. We had sold our business, TurboTap, and took a little bit of time off. We wanted to live somewhere for a couple of years without winter. The business we sold was, I guess, like I mentioned, TurboTap. If you haven't seen TurboTap, I've got a quick little video. This ran on Fox News a number of years ago. I had one shot on live television to pour a perfect beer. I got lucky and nailed it. But it pours very fast. Mostly what it does is it pours with less waste. So sports stadiums that use it waste about 10 to 15% less beer. So we sold that business and moved back to Madison with the idea of putting down some roots. Moved back to Madison for a lot of reasons, which I won't get into, but can maybe do that on the Q&A. But we love Madison, so we moved back here. And shortly after we moved back, putting down roots, we had our daughter Elizabeth, who in 2010. Nowadays, our family's grown a little bit. We have Charlie, who's also about to turn about 2 at the end of this month. So we love it here in Madison. Around that time, I was also ready to start a new business, even though I wasn't sure what that might be. So I started networking around Madison, trying to reconnect with some of my old friends and colleagues that I got to know when I was living here previously. One of those friends is here in the room today, Brian Chan, friend and mentor of mine, a Rotarian. And Brian was great about introducing me to people in town. And one of those places that he introduced me to folks, Brian runs SuperNet Communications. He has these fantastic anniversary events for his business every year. And I think it's the 15th anniversary of SuperNet. He had an event at Capitol Brewery in Madison. He was introducing me to all sorts of folks. And one of the guys that he introduced me to is standing there in the photo, Preston Austin. And Preston and I, Preston is a coffee guy. I'm not a coffee guy, but coffee shop after coffee shop, we were meeting, and we ultimately ended up launching a company together called Murphy.com. That product launched in 2011. We grew it downtown for a number of years, and just recently we moved out to Middleton with the company. We've got about 40 people out working out of the building that used to be the Full Compass building, right on Terrace Avenue, right across the street, ironically, I guess, from Capitol Brewery. So everything can tie back to beer with me, I guess, somehow. So I'll come back to Preston in a bit. Like Brian Chan, another mentor of mine, Joe Boucher of Nider and Boucher, was really good about introducing me, kind of getting me plugged back into the Madison community. And one of the people that he introduced me to was a young entrepreneur. He just graduated UW. His name is Nate Lustig. Nate had started and sold a company while he was still in college and was in the process of starting another business. And we had been kind of batting ideas back and forth. And then in spring of 2010, he went to this great big festival in Austin, Texas, and came back, and he invited me out to beers at Jenna's and sat down. And he had been at the festival that he was at was South by Southwest. And he said, you know, Matt, I had a great time at South by Southwest. I think we should do something like that here in Madison. Now, mind you, South by Southwest at that time had probably 50 or 60,000 attendees. It had been running for about 20, 25 years. I said, Nate, we just don't launch something like that overnight. So what did you have in mind? He said, well, how about we put on a conference? And I was a little skeptical. I said, well, you know, there are a lot of organizations that do conferences for entrepreneurs. And you know, so you know, what are we going to do that's different? What did you have in mind? And he said, well, there are a lot of people that do conferences for entrepreneurs, but usually it's not the entrepreneurs that are doing the conferences. It's, you know, it's folks that are there in support roles for entrepreneurs. It's attorneys, it's accountants, those sorts of things. And he said, we want to do something that's by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. And I really thought that was a great idea. So I signed on, and so we said, okay, let's do this thing first year, Forward Technology Conference. We originally were going to call it, instead of the Forward Technology Conference, North by Midwest. We thought that would be a good play. And we put up a website, and it took all of about 48 hours before we got a letter from South by Southwest. So if there are attorneys in the room, you can kind of see where that went. But we there was a festival going on called the Forward Music Festival at the time, and we liked that name, and we talked to those folks and thought maybe at some point if we can do this thing with tech and they're doing the thing with music, we can put them all together. So that's how we went with the Forward Technology, the Forward name. So once we'd started organizing that conference, and I was talking to Preston a little. We were working my day job with Murphy. So Preston was kind of looking over my shoulder when we were planning some of this stuff, and he said that he said, you know, Matt, there are actually a number of other events that are taking place right around this time in August that are happening. One, High Tech Happy Hour was one of them. Sector 67, a makerspace was having an event. Capital Entrepreneurs was having an event. Bar Camp Madison has nothing to do with drinking, actually. But there were 4 other events that were taking place right around that same time. And Preston said, well, why don't you just kind of connect them? Let's try that again. Connect them all together and call it a festival. And we said, that's a great idea. But that meant having to reach out to those different event organizers. So I went back to Brian Chan, and who was running and had been running a great High Tech Happy Hour, and had hundreds of people showing up. I said, Brian, would you be willing to make the High Tech Happy Hour part of this new thing we're calling the Forward Festival? And Brian said, yep, I am in. And I said, great. He's like, no, I'm not just in on that. I'm in. I want to help with the festival. I'm like, really? So Brian was in, and at that point, that was the co-founding team for the Forward Festival, Brian, myself, and Nate. And so that first year we launched with those 5 events, including the new Forward Tech Conference, and a mission of the Forward Festival has always been to connect. So to connect entrepreneurs, to connect organizations, that's something that we've always looked to do. And if you look at sort of what kind of the way, there are a lot of organizations in Madison that are there to help startups, to help entrepreneurs. This is just a partial list. Accelerate, Merlin, High Tech Happy Hour. The list goes on, and it continues to grow, which is amazing because you want to have a lot of places in a community for entrepreneurs to plug in. You don't want to just have sort of one central point, in my opinion. Some people disagree with me on that, but you want to have a lot of different places for people to plug into the community to get their company started. But we're still all creatures of habit, and so we plug in, and oftentimes silos form. and you don't sort of, you kind of end up in your own group and you don't get to connect with others. And so a mission of the Forward Festival has been to make those connections, to once a year break down those silos and get people to host events so that we can sort of cross-connect and get to know everybody in the community. And along those lines, what we do is for hosting events for the festival, we really have just 3 rules. So the festival is essentially a canvas. So you hear about the Forward Festival. There are 44 events this year, and I was like, how does that happen? Well, the festival is the canvas. The events are the paint that get put on the canvas. And we only have 3 rules in terms of hosting events on the Forward Fest calendar. The first rule is that it has to be an open event, meaning that it has to be open to the public. So the Madison Chamber, for example, can't host a chamber member-only event as part of the Forward Festival. They can host an event, but it has to be open to the community. Events can charge. That's not a problem. Most of the events on the calendar are free, and you have, I think, the event menus at your tables. Most of the events are free. Some are paid events. So that's rule number 1, is it has to be open. The second rule is that everybody has to cross-promote everybody else's stuff. So individual events promote other events. They promote the festival, and then the festival in turn promotes all the events. And that leads to some fantastic network effects, which I'll get into. And then the third general rule is that it has to somehow tie to entrepreneurship. And we have a pretty broad definition of that. So a lot of events will qualify, but it has to somehow tie back to being an entrepreneur, to starting something, to doing something creative, to creating something in the community and the benefits that provides. So those are the 3 rules, and that's the canvas, and it's worked out pretty well since we started. You can see back in 2010, we had 5 events that were part of the Forward Festival. I think it was an 11-day festival at that point to kind of connect all those things up. And this year we have 44 events, and you can see all the events on your menus that are running on August 18th through the 25th. So along with the growth in events, there's also been terrific growth in attendance at those events, starting with about 600 folks. And I think probably 400 of the 600, Brian, were high-tech happy hour folks the first year. So you helped us boost our numbers that first year. But we've seen nice growth in attendees across the events over the last 6 years as well. And because I'm a metrics guy, and when I was putting this presentation, I said, well, how are we trending? And this is the first time I put this here. Like, how are we trending relative to like the big one, South by Southwest? So I put this together so you can see Forward Fest in blue and South by Southwest. This is the interactive. So if you look at the first 6 years of South by Southwest Interactive, what they did. Now, like, this is only part of the story, of course, of South by Southwest. You can see kind of what they did ultimately. But you can also see it took them a good 11, 12 years before they really really found their footing and saw a lot of traction there. So I don't know what that means for the Forward Festival. We're kind of taking it one day at a time at this point, or 1 year at a time, but we're having a lot of fun with it. There we go. So 44 events, and it's across. One of the neat parts about it is the way this is set up is it really is reflective of what's happening in the community, because it's this open canvas for folks to put events on there. And so we have events for biotech and tech and software and art and social good, music, family, food. There's a lot of food entrepreneurship happening in Madison. So a lot of great stuff is happening here. And I realize that if you haven't heard of the festival before, if you haven't attended the festival before, it's a lot to navigate. So what I've done here is I'm going to talk about a couple beginner Forward Festival events. For those of you that are thinking about trying it out, I want to get everybody to come out to at least one event. That's kind of my mission here tonight. Is like we get everybody out to at least one event on the calendar. Hopefully more, but one. So I'm going to cover just 5 of the beginner events. I'm leaving a lot of great stuff out, so don't by any means think that these are the only things that are great to attend, because there's a lot of good stuff. The first one, of course, being the kickoff event, which is High Tech Happy Hour. That's taking place this year at Madison Children's Museum. It's on Thursday evening. It's a terrific, just open event. Just show up, and there's great beer. There's some appetizers, and hey, it's the Children's Museum. You can pretend you're a kid again, 5 to 8, and hang out there. Parentpreneur Night. So one of the themes, and partly I think it's because I've got kids and Brian has kids, and as entrepreneurs age, we have kids, and now we think about what's it like to be an entrepreneur with kids. But But that's, Madison is a place, one of the big perks that we have here in terms of starting companies is that we're a very family-friendly place to have a business, to grow a business. And so that's reflected in the calendar. We have a number of events on the schedule that you can bring your kids if they're aspiring entrepreneurs. If you're an entrepreneur, you can bring your family along and have a great event. So that's taking place on Saturday, or actually that's August 18th, August 20th, Saturday night from 5 to 8 at Matrix Co-working. Pitch night. This is a threefer, 3 events in one. And that is August 23rd, it's Tuesday at the Monona Terrace. It starts with the Forward Festival Startup Showcase. There are 5 companies that present for 5 minutes, and then about 20 companies that present for 1 minute. So if you want to get a great cross-section of all the stuff that's happening among startups in Madison, that's a great session to go to. And that rolls into a Greater Madison Chamber event called Nexpo, which is also a big happy hour. So there's food, there'll be beer, there'll be drinks, and you'll be able to see what's next from a lot of great businesses in town. And then immediately following that, still at Monona Terrace, is the Pressure Chamber, which is like the Chamber's version of Shark Tank. And 5 companies pitch, 1 gets selected, and the winner gets the golden suitcase, where they get an all expenses paid trip to Silicon Valley to pitch to some of the big venture capitalists out there. So high stakes at Pressure Chamber. And then there's a lot of good stuff, a lot of great stuff that's happening with women entrepreneurs in Madison. There's a group called the Doyen Group that is all about making Madison a great place for women to start and grow businesses. And along with 1 Million Cups, another organization, they're hosting an event called 5 by 5 by 5, which is five women will pitch for 5 minutes each, and the winner will get $5,000, a $5,000 grant to put toward their company. And this is a breakfast event, so a lot of the stuff I was showcasing earlier were evening events. This is a breakfast event at the Madison Central Library, so another excellent event to attend. And then the wrap-up event, one of the wrap-up events this year is the Capital Entrepreneurs Open Social. It takes place at 5:30 on August 25th, next Thursday, at the Boardman and Clark offices. They have this fantastic terrace sort of overlooking the Capitol. This is one of the pictures from the event a couple years ago. So you can come and meet the other Capital entrepreneurs and enjoy some of the beer. Now, one thing to note is the gentleman on the left in this picture, Henry Schwartz, is one of the co-founders of Mobcraft Brewery. They're a crowdsourced microbrewery. They brew a custom beer. So I think we're the only festival that has its own beer. The only tech festival anyway, called the ForwardFest of Ale, which you'll be able to drink throughout the week. And ForwardFest of Ale, yeah, there we go. So how does this all happen? Because there's a lot of stuff here, and everyone kind of looks at me sometimes, looks at Brian's like, how do you guys do it? Because Brian runs SuperNet, I run Murphy, Brian's in Rotary every Wednesday, I'm on the Chamber. So there's a lot. The answer is we don't do most of it. There are a lot of volunteers, most of whom are entrepreneurs. And so one of the great privileges of having grown the Forward Festival is the opportunity to work shoulder to shoulder with other doers, other creators in the community. And that's just been a terrific experience. And we have 50 to 60 volunteers that are putting on events across a lot of venues. So I'll give a shout out to Elizabeth Tucker, who's here from MMOCA. MMOCA is hosting a number of events this year. I'll be at the Friday night event, MMOCA Nights, and the Art Plus Tech event. So that's a new venue this year that's on the docket, but Monona Terrace, MMOCA, Madison Public Library, WID, the events are happening all around town. And then the last thing that makes everything possible are sponsors. So we have 11 sponsors this year for the festival, and those are some of the larger festival sponsors. Individual events oftentimes will also have their own festival sponsorship, or own event sponsorship. So there are likely, in addition to these 11, there's probably another 10 or 15. So we have probably several dozen companies that are sponsoring events throughout the week. So, if you're from one of those organizations, if you know folks in those organizations, thank you very much. We couldn't do it without you. I'm like right on the edge of my range for the clicker. So we plan these events, and I wanted to give a shout out to co-working spaces in town. Who here has heard of co-working or has been to a co-working space? Okay, so co-working is, I could describe it as a study hall for adults. It's a little bit more like you can rent a desk by the month. It can be a permanent desk, or you can show up. Some of you might be familiar with like office rental places like Regis. Those are about getting your own office and having an address. Co-working is about community and the people that you work with, and it's a way for folks that are starting something up that don't want to have their own official office to have a space. They can call their own. They can network with other people in a similar vein. And Horizon Co-working is something that I co-founded with Preston, just as part of an experiment. We run it on the square, and a lot of the stuff that takes place is happening. A lot of the coordinating of all this stuff happens there because we all have our businesses, but we need to sort of get out of there to be able to meet and do this stuff. And so that happens at places like Horizon Co-working, like Matrix Co-working, like 100 State. I'm sure you've heard about a project called Starting Block. There's going to be co-working there. These things they work and they're great, and you see some awesome things like the Forward Festival come out of them. Why does it matter? Who cares about this stuff? So we're entrepreneurs. We like to have a good party, clearly, right? So it's a festival. We get to go out and have a party. But why should everybody and why should anybody in Madison care about this stuff? One reason is we want to make Madison a great place to start companies, and that's because young companies generate nearly all new net jobs. So this data I got from the Kauffman Foundation. They're one of the leading global think tanks around entrepreneurship. But if you look back, it can be good times, it can be bad times, recession, boom times. On net, you want startups in your community if you want to have more jobs in your community. So that's one reason. So the Forward Festival makes Madison a great place to be if you're starting a company. The other reason kind of is a little more nuanced, and the Kauffman Foundation looked at sort of all the sort of ingredients that go into making a community a good community, one that fosters growth of companies. And so they looked at things like finance and incubators and university and like all these 6 items that are on the board. They looked at that, and while they all sound really good on paper, a lot of them, if you look at the data, the jury is out on whether a lot of these things on this list make a difference. And in some cases, they've actually shown that they really don't have any impact as to whether or not a community is good for fast growth. And so the current thinking among the Kauffman Foundation as a community, like what can we do as a community to foster the growth of startups? The main thing that they have come out with now is to say, look, the biggest thing you can do is connect. You can be a connector. You want to connect entrepreneurs to other entrepreneurs, get them out of their silos. Support organizations, connect entrepreneurs to support organizations. We have that long list, make sure they're going to those things. Promote learning among entrepreneurs, and then also promote the practical more than the theoretical. So, find mentors, get people hooked up. These are the big ingredients now that they're showing that can move the needle and make a difference. And we didn't know this when we launched the Forward Festival, but it's nice to see that what we kind of intuitively knew could be helpful, it turns out now there's data to show that yes, it does make a difference here in Madison. So what can everybody in the room do? So a few calls to action. Number one, support the Forward Festival. The big thing I want everybody to do is look at that event menu, find one event to attend. So unless you're on vacation, if you're on vacation, that's an excuse I'll accept. I know Rotary doesn't accept that as an excuse, but I'll accept that as an excuse. If you're not in Madison, we don't have the equivalent thing happening elsewhere in the world. Nigeria, how cool. This is the day the Forward Fest went global. So thanks for coming. Support co-working spaces, because again, that's another one of those places where a lot of those connections happen. And then support the Madison startups by making introductions, by having an open door, by mentoring if you are in a position to do so. So there you have it. That's a little bit of the history, background on the Forward Festival. I hope to see everybody out at the events. I can't physically make it to all 44. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can. We have a new award this year for whoever makes it to the most. So go crazy. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good rest of your summer. We appreciate the opportunity to speak. All right, so am I calling out the question right over here?
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Ron Luskin. I'm curious about two things. One, do you have a sense of how many people are coming to Madison and perhaps spending nights in our hotels and enjoying our restaurants? And the second thing would be, you didn't mention your business model. To what extent are you generating revenue and building equity?
Sure. So the first answer is it's mostly a Madison thing. So we I think have probably broader aspirations. The first mission of the Forward Festival is to connect folks really well in Madison and maybe to a slightly broader extent in Wisconsin. If it grows beyond that, that's great. I think the second mission ultimately will be to make Madison, promote Madison, use it as a way to help promote outsiders from Madison. But we're not very far along on that second mission. In terms of the business model, we hope to break even every year. Brian's chuckling because it doesn't always work out that way. So this is not a this isn't a we're doing this out of love more so than a desire to turn this into a big business for us, because we all have our day jobs, and I think we're intending to keep it that way. So the events that charge, usually it's because there's catering or there's event space costs. So the events that charge during the Forward Festival typically are charging to hope to cover their costs. And the free events usually have sponsors to cover that. So yeah. Question?
Obviously, progress was made in the world in terms of entrepreneurship before there was a festival atmosphere tool to make it happen. And the entrepreneurs that we know, started in the basement, then moved to the garage and rented garage by themselves many times, working alone, that it frankly brought us to where we are today before the festival entrepreneurship concept came along. Is there something today about the challenges that progress faces that has outlived the single entrepreneur working in the basement, working in the garage, working alone, working in the university lab, that has changed the challenge? Or is there hope for the single entrepreneur, the university researcher, et cetera, who's doing it the old-fashioned way?
The old-fashioned way being, let me hole up in in my lab, and I did that with TurboTap. So I had a beer lab, and I was kind of like the lone inventor, when I was doing a lot of that work. So I kind of know how it is. But ultimately, when you want to launch something, you got to get out there into the world. And I think the lone inventor oftentimes is a myth. If you look at even companies, you always see it's usually a couple of people. You oftentimes see co-founders like Hewlett and Packard, and it wasn't just Bill Gates, it wasn't just Steve Jobs. So oftentimes it's more than one. But I think it's faster to launch stuff now. So I think it's faster to prototype. So I think you can be an inventor, but I think now the amount of time that you need to spend in the lab, writing code, building servers, that is all compressed a lot. So I think you get through that phase, that sort of mad scientist phase, a lot more quickly in many cases, where you need to reach out and build out a team. So I don't know that it's necessarily changed, that it's not individual inspiration that is there to change the world. I just think the individual inspiration, it happens faster, or at least that inspiration can be turned into reality a lot faster now, where you have to reach out and build. So I'm certainly not this is all just my personal experience. I'm not an expert on that topic, but that's my thoughts. Over here, yes.
Thanks, Linda Baldwin. This sounds like a really fun event. I used to produce events. This is a good one, huh, Brian? My question is, from what I could tell, there was no university involvement anywhere. So is that intentional or just another step?
It's not intentional, and part of it, I think, is the timing of the year, because it's right before school starts. So I think that's part of it. In the past, the university has been a host, so the College of Engineering has hosted events in the past. I think this year, just sort of the way it works out. We've been talking to folks at WRF about some things, and we do have events at WID. So there is sort of tangential involvement. We also reach out to some of the student groups on campus to get them to come out. So the fact that UW isn't a sponsor we do get a lot of sort of young upcoming entrepreneurs that take part in the events. But nothing, yeah, it's Brian might laugh at sometimes the problem with the Forward Festival is that we're very unintentional about the way it is because it is very grassroots and open and a lot of the stuff just kind of happens. And we like it that way because it keeps everything current. Because if it's just up to Brian and me, and we're getting older, and eventually we're the old guys in the room, and if we try to figure out how to program stuff for the next set of entrepreneurs, we're going to miss the mark by a lot. So this keeps it fresh the way we have it formatted. There is the Badger Startup Summit, yes. Yeah.
Matt, first I want to say you've been a great addition to the board of directors of the Madison Development Corporation, and it's a great sense to get an understanding of what you're doing on a broader palette. My question is who these entrepreneurs are and what sectors they represent. Our sense is that they're heavily in the health sector and IT field. Is that correct? And if not, where are the entrepreneurs working in what fields?
Yeah, that's great. And when we first launched, a lot of it was software. And I think the gap that we tried to fill the first year, when I'm talking to Nate Lustig, so Nate and I, we were starting software companies in Madison. And Madison, back then there were really, I called it two camps for startup folks. There was the tech transfer camp, which was you're a university researcher, you probably have a patent through WARF, and then you wanted to start a business. And then there were folks like Nate and me and others that were starting software companies where we didn't necessarily have IP. We were UW graduates, but not researchers, and we were just sort of launching something. And there still are those camps, but food entrepreneurship has exploded. There's a lot of great stuff happening there. We're seeing a lot of stuff happening with social entrepreneurship now, making the community better, so doing well and doing good. So you do see a nice cross-section of what's happening in the community. But there is a lot happening in software and biotech, so you will see a lot of that. But I think you'll also see a lot of, there's also a myth of, a lot of on the tech side that these are heavy tech businesses. Most of the companies, most of the startups that I know aren't deep tech companies. They're what I call tech-enabled businesses. So they use tech to solve a problem. A big company or a big startup in Madison is called Eat Street, right? They try to make it easy for you to order food and have it delivered online. That's not, ultimately that's not. You don't need to have a lot of PhD researchers figuring how to do that, right? But they're tech-enabled. They have a mobile app. They have a web app. They do all those sorts of things. So that's a lot of what's happening right now. So I think everybody here can relate very well to a lot of the businesses, not deep tech. Although we do have some deep tech stuff happening. We have a big data meetup and things. So if you really want to geek out at the Forward Festival, you can do that. But you can also just socialize with folks that are launching businesses that are tech-enabled. Okay, last question.
Hi, Matt. Thanks very much for speaking about this. One of the goals of the club here is to increase racial equity among businesses. What is the Forward Festival doing in that regard?
Again, it's making everything just very open and approachable, I think is the main thing, and making a concerted effort to reach out to those communities. So when we have events, we have a Spring Tech Kickoff event. We make it a point to reach out to constituents, Black Chamber, Latino Chamber, get folks invited out. But also, if you look at the calendar, we have events for social good. There's a racial equity event related that's happening at the library. So just sort of organically, as that sort of story has kind of been woven into the Madison community, become more of something that folks are interested in. You've seen those events added to the calendar, and I think that is a sign for us that the Forward Festival is doing what it's supposed to do in terms of keeping the dialogue current. So. Fantastic. Well, I guess thank you again. It was a privilege to speak with this group.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you to all of our guests today. Our meeting is adjourned.